So this is the Gibson J45. This is it, the American Workhorse. So I've had this in my shop a bunch, and I've never talked about it. I'm not really sure why, because it's got a crazy history. It's amazing they ever even put it out, and it's actually even crazier that it maintained a really good reputation, because Gibson... Anyway, I'll tell you more about that as we go along here. But the J45 is a household name. Players like Donavon, Dylan, Lightnin Hopkins, Buddy Holly, even Woody Guthrie played the SJ, which is just an upscale J45 with fancy inlays. I've played a lot of J45s through the years, and they're all totally different, and that has to do with the unique period of time when they were making these instruments and how and why they evolved to become what was known as, and still is known as, the American Workhorse. This particular guitar lives up to that name, to be sure, and I'll tell you more about that later. But where did the J45 come from? J45, it's a Depression-era guitar. It was first meant to replace the earlier J35. So during this time, all the materials were supposed to go to the war effort. And so maybe bad timing to promote a new guitar, but leave it to Gibson to leverage the war. And you can check out an advertisement that they had, "Only a Gibson is good enough." And what a bold thing to say, you know. Yeah, stuff's going to the war effort, but if there are any exceptions, only a Gibson is good enough. I mean, they went as far as to put it on the headstock of their own guitars, which is beautiful branding, I have to say. I always thought that J45 kind of sounded like the name of a fighter ship or something. J is for jumbo, which by today's standards, this really isn't like a jumbo guitar. And the 45 is how much it cost, which is mind-blowing. Now, in today's dollar, it's this much. Which is still a chunk of change. So no matter how you slice it, it was kind of a bold move to try to promote a brand new guitar during these times, but somehow they did it, and they created the image of the American Workhorse and something that fostered, you know, American ingenuity during times of war. Now obviously they couldn't maintain this. After a few years, Gibson had to announce that, yeah, hey, we're not going to make instruments at all, and 100% of our efforts are going to go towards the war. Except that actually wasn't true now, was it, Gibson? And this is where the J45 history gets pretty interesting. And this is the Kalamazoo years. Now, while Gibson was busy earning excellence in production for their war efforts, a little brand called Kalamazoo was busy making 25,000 guitars. Kalamazoo, owned by the Gibson Company. The Kalamazoo has a fascinating history all their own, which I'd love to share about. Maybe I'll get another one in here one of these days and make a video about it. But it was essentially a women-run guitar-making operation, and their ingenuity was a class all their own. The unauthorized Kalamazoos, as well as the few Benner Gibsons they were able to get out under the radar, they were able to create such a cool piece of history and really uphold the Gibson legacy. It wasn't without bumps in the road, though, because the Gibson J45 was discontinued. There's kind of three reputable eras. The first is what is commonly called the Banner era, and this is roughly through the 40s. The first year had this iconic fire stripe teardrop pickguard, but by 43 the tortoiseshell became the standard. And then there's what I call the transitional era, which was roughly the 50s, and a lot of stuff changed in the 50s. So the pickguard changed to kind of a more elongated shape. We also added a fret now for 20 frets. The bracing changed, so it was still an X brace, but it was slightly different dimension. And probably the biggest change is they changed the bridge. So it went from what's often called a soap bar bridge to this belly up bridge or reverse belly. Another huge change was the first ever option to have an adjustable bridge, which takes us to the 60s, which is what I'm calling the adjustable era. The 60s was a pretty interesting time for the world and a very interesting time for Gibson. The adjustable bridge became standard. The width of the neck actually changed, which was common of most Gibson guitars in that time period. They're just kind of getting into more comfortable necks. And then there's these inner years that I'm calling the plastic years, and that's when the guitar came with a plastic adjustable bridge. Now these didn't last long for good reason, but that's the 60s for you, people. Which is kind of when the J45 got a little bit less reputable to the point where it was canceled from the line altogether. Now, at the end of the 60s, Gibson sold the company to the Norlin Corporation, and this is commonly known as the Norlin years. Now, in the 70s, the Gibson J45 lost its most iconic appearance. Not the bridge, but these sloped shoulders. Now that's like going from when the Ford Ranger had its nice boxy square shape to when they made it all curvy. Now nothing wrong with boxy or curvy, but we get to know something. Don't change it on us. Now, in the 80s, they ended up putting the slope shoulders back on the J45. Maybe it was to save it because it wasn't selling, and if that was the reason, it didn't work because by the mid 80s, the J45 was not for sale any longer. It was dismissed from the line. Now, the Norlin company does not own Gibson any longer. They've sold it a bunch of times. I don't know. I'm not up to date with all that, but apparently the J45 is back on the line, has been for a while now, and is the top selling instrument that Gibson offers. So I don't know what happened there, but either way, the instrument's reputation is back. And it's a good thing because the J45 sound is unlike any other guitar I've ever played. It's got a big open voice. It's airy. It's shimmery, but without being too shimmery. There's enough punch behind every note, and it's a great country guitar. It's a great fingerstyle guitar. I like that about the J45. It's a super versatile guitar. This one is actually the adjustable version. As you'll notice, though, it is not adjustable any longer. And I actually literally couldn't remember if I was the one who replaced this or not. And because it looks like my work, and the owner told me that it was my mentor's work. So it makes sense. So this guitar belongs to a great country artist here in town, and she's heading down to Austin, Texas this weekend. And so she brought it in for kind of a string and clean. And I love doing that for people. I love knowing that this guitar is just going to get the crap worked out of it. And it already has, and it's just great knowing that it always will. I'll take this thing over to the bench now for some sexy B-roll, and if that can hold your attention for at least one more minute, you can hear this workhorse work.